Welcome to the Love of the Star podcast. I'm Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105 through the Fan in Dallas, joined as always by former Super Bowl winning NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation, 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday on 105 through the Fan in Dallas. He is also the pre- and post-game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network. And Brian, after last week when you felt a little empty, you felt a little football empty because we were post-draft, and there wasn't a lot going on. You now have football fullness because we have the 2023 schedule release.
I tell you what, Bobby, this would be a great gig if you didn't have to play these games, but now they're going to make you play these games. It's always fun to evaluate, kind of build your team, draft. All right, that's it. Let's start working on the next year's draft. Yeah. But no, they're going to make you play these games. And I think along the way, I don't think they did the Cowboys much of a favor. I just feel like that the schedule, it's going to be difficult for the teams in the NFC East. Not only the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Commanders, and the Giants. Depending on, like I say, the way that it falls for some of these, the third place games or the second place games and stuff like that. But it's very interesting, some of the trips that the Cowboys are going to have to make. It's going to be very interesting to see them play in December, where you have that stretch of Philly, Buffalo, Miami, and Detroit. I think in the season, if you're fighting for a spot, if you're fighting for the division, Buffalo and Miami will probably be fighting for a spot themselves, who, those games will be vitally important to them. All December games are important, when you're in the hunt, but there's some interesting gymnastics that you're going to have to do to get through this season.
Yeah. So let's go down. We'll break this down sort of by month and just kind of go through it and give takeaways from it. So the Cowboys, the first month of the season, they play 3 games in September. They open the season on the road against the Giants on Sunday Night Football. Then it is the following week at AT&T Stadium. Aaron Rodgers and the Jets come to town. And then Sunday, September 24th, a 3:25 kickoff on the road against the Arizona Cardinals. So you open things up on the road against the Giants, at home against the Jets, on the road against the Cardinals. Your first thoughts on that? Are you surprised at all we got the Mike McCarthy, Aaron Rodgers matchup so early in the year?
Yeah, to be honest with you, Bobby, I kind of thought it might be the game that leads off the season for the Cowboys, just because of the draw of the Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy. We saw what happened last year during that whole thing with the game that was played in Green Bay, Mike McCarthy going back. I felt like that the drama for that would probably lead the league into, wanting to get that up and on the schedule early. And they have gotten on the schedule early. I thought it was going to be in week 1, to be honest with you.
And then we've got around that again once more. The Cowboys starting the season against the Giants, which it feels like every year. It's the Giants opening the season on Sunday Night Football. A little bit more intrigue this time around because the Giants have improved, and they continue to improve, and they continue to get better. And I got to imagine that the schedule makers look at that and go, this should be the rekindling of a better competition. Dak Prescott has beaten the Giants 10 straight games.
Yeah, and but let's be honest about what's going on with the Giants. I feel like that they're better coached. I feel like that they've made the commitment to Daniel Jones, whether you like that or not. They've added some really. You look at their draft and they didn't have a whole hell of a lot of picks. But what they were able to do is the quality that they were able to add. I felt like was, when you add Jalen Hyatt and John Michael Schmitz, are guys that we clearly talked about. I think the biggest addition for them, if you look at Darren Waller, I don't think we're talking about and Darren Waller doesn't always stay completely healthy, but Darren Waller will be a problem in this division. And, you've got to match up with him, but the Giants, they've added some nice skill there. And I mentioned with Jalen Hyatt. So a couple of guys that you're going to have to deal with early in this season.
Cowboys roll into October 1st. They kick off the month with the New England Patriots at AT&T Stadium.
Can I circle back real quick, Bob, on something?
Yeah.
You finished there with the month with Arizona. And
Mm-hmm.
what team will Arizona be early in the year? You know, you've got the newness of the coaching staff, a new general manager, new ideas. You know, usually as seasons go on, you know, maybe teams get beat down and the message doesn't always resonate at the end if you're going to new coach, new staff. I worry about that game a little bit just for the aspect of all the new things that are going on with Arizona. You know, if you play them later in the year, maybe they've lost a little of that fight and fire. And I think then week 3, they still have a little fight and fire. So that's a game to kind of keep an eye on.
Yeah, and it's Jonathan Gannon, a guy who's had the game plan for the Cowboys the last 2 years, has gone up against Lenny. And so has some familiarity. That's going to be one of the more familiar opponents, I'm sure, for him on the schedule here that early in the season. Going into October, open up things at home against the Patriots, then back-to-back tough primetime road games. October 8th, you've got the 49ers on the road for Sunday Night Football. You come back home and then travel right back out to the West Coast after a week of practice for Monday Night Football against the Chargers. Then you get a bye week, which I feel like you're going to need after back-to-back road games on the West Coast coming and going like that. A bye week is probably really valuable there in week 7. And then October 29th at home against the Rams, the first noon kickoff of the year for the Cowboys. But, man, I look at that and I just think that back-to-back West Coast road trip looks really difficult.
It is very difficult. And, you know, the San Francisco will be a very, very physical game. And, you know, again, you're right. Coming back, I wouldn't be surprised if you're the Cowboys of maybe even thinking about staying out on the coast. And, you know, maybe you make you know, with that game with the Chargers, maybe you could go back and practice and stay at the old River Ridge complex there in Oxnard and train a little bit, you know, if you could. I know I'm just kind of throwing it out there, but you know,
why not?
Why not? But yeah, I think it's, you know, the thing about, you know, you're talking about a team, a roster. Now, we really don't know what's going to happen with San Francisco at quarterback. That could be an absolute mess, or they could figure it out. If you know the 49ers, if you know how they play, if you know Kyle Shanahan and that group, they could plug quarterbacks in and they seem to do very well. The interesting one to me is the Chargers game. And that one will be because, you know, you'll have an idea of Kellen Moore and what you want to do. But I'm thinking about the roster and what the Chargers, you know, have done, and adding Quentin Johnston to that thing. And, you know, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen in that group, that, you know, they've got some legitimate, you know, skill guys there. And then, you know, with the whole thing with Austin Eckler, you know, that's something. The last time that the Cowboys, you know, played the Chargers out there in Los Angeles, it came down to a 57-yard field goal to win that thing. And it looked like the clock was running down and all kinds of crazy things going on. So, but yeah, and you know, the Chargers have added some, you know, one of my favorite players, that Dayan Henley, you know, from Washington State, is one of the linebackers. And they've got a really good group of linebackers when you talk about Khalil Mack, Kenneth Murray, Eric Kendricks, you know, and add Henley to that group. Man, their defense to me got a little bit better with the addition of Henley playing for them.
Yeah, now you've got the 2 home games kind of bookending either side there. New England at the beginning of the month, and then the Rams at the back end of the month. Obviously, a lot of attention is going to be on those 2 road games on the West Coast. But any thoughts about New England or the Rams heading to this? The Rams obviously are just they're not the team that they were a couple of years ago. There are a lot of questions about Matthew Stafford, what kind of ability he's going to have after there was talk that, man, his arm might be shot this offseason. And then all the drama in New England where they can't seem to commit to their quarterback, Mac Jones. But, you know, a couple games there sandwiched in between. You feel pretty good about those?
Well, the New England game, yeah, we'll see what happens. New England, clearly not the team that they've been in the past, especially, you know, minus, you minus the Tom Brady and, but that's, the fact that they're here. I always take my chances with that. It's when it's a 325 game, that Bill Belichick will have them ready. He'll have a plan for Dak Prescott. The Cowboys got a really nice win when they were up in Foxborough last time that these two teams met. CeeDee Lamb with a really nice play, but I'm focusing on that game. When you start to talk about the Rams, and where are the Rams going to be? Where is Matthew Stafford going to be? They really, really like Stetson Bennett. And I know this sounds crazy, but could this be, if you start to see them have more problems along the offensive line, the concussion issues and things like that Stafford dealt with? He really got banged up last year. And so, could this be a game that all of a sudden we see a guy like Stetson Bennett get an opportunity to play against the Cowboys, halfway through the season? They've added some, with Steve, they added our tackle guard from Steve Avila from TCU.
Mm-hmm.
He's a projected starter. Zach Evans from Ole Miss is a guy that we really, really liked a lot. And, and also too, with Warren McClendon, so they've added some guys, a couple of guys in the offensive line, a quarterback, a runner, and, but it's still, the Cooper Kupps, Van Jeffersons, and those kinds of guys as well.
Going into November, you come off of the Rams game to close the month of October. It's on the road against the Eagles on November 5th, 3:25 kick. Then it's at home against the Giants. They in years past, the Cowboys have gotten the benefit of the back-to-back home games on Thanksgiving. They are not getting that this year. They get on the road against Carolina. It is a noon kick, so they'll be back in Dallas on Sunday night before it rolls over. But Carolina, November 19th on the road. Then Thanksgiving is at home against Washington. And then the following Thursday, it is a Thursday night game against the Eagles. Thursday night game against the Seahawks.
Yeah.
To close out the month of November. So you've got on the road against Philly, home against the Giants, on the road against Panthers, and then Washington and Seattle at home on the 2 Thursdays to close it out. Anything stand out to you as difficult there? The thing that stood out to me, like I said, is the fact that they got the road game before the Thanksgiving one. They don't always schedule them that way, and Cowboys didn't get the benefit this year.
Yeah, I think that the interesting thing to me is the short week, and then it's the Commanders, but it's Eric Bieniemy and the Commanders. It's a new offensive coordinator there. Jack Del Rio is still in the mix there as the defensive coordinator. Ron Rivera, but to me, this team, where will they be quarterback-wise? Where will Sam Howell? Sam Howell looked very good against the Cowboys. I say very good, but he got the win. Last year in the final week of the season, so he'll have a little confidence. We'll see how he's playing, up to that point when he comes into town. I still love the skill of the Commanders, Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson and Curtis Samuel. I think there's just some really, really good talent there. That offensive line could be a little physical. Nick Gates is the starter at center, but Ricky Stromberg is a guy that you and I liked it coming out of the draft from Arkansas. Could Ricky Stromberg, could he push for starting time there? I think that would literally would solidify some things, with this group. But it's a team that runs the ball well with Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson, and also with Logan Thomas at tight end. So this will be a tough game. And, the Carolina game could be a very physical game. It's a very winnable game because they'll likely be playing with a rookie quarterback. But you turn around and then having to play the Commanders on a short week with the defense that they have, with the offensive skill guys they have, that'll be a tough matchup for the Cowboys. The
Commanders are going to be playing the Giants at home the previous week. Both the Cowboys and Commanders are playing noon kickoffs. Cowboys in Charlotte, Commanders in DC. Do you think that's the NFL trying to just make it as level of
They're trying
travel as possible?
Yeah, they are. They absolutely are. Yep.
Rolling into the month of December, a tough December stretch. You do get a little bit of a mini bye because you're coming off the Thursday game against Seattle, so you get a 10-day rest leading into Sunday Night Football against the Eagles at home. No travel there. And so you're coming off the 2 home games, and it's a 10-day layoff. So you get that heading to the Eagles. Then you get December 17th on the road, middle of December against Buffalo. That's the one game I didn't want to see on the schedule, was middle of December against Buffalo. You come back home, then it's off to Miami for a Christmas Eve game. It's during the day, but it's on the 24th. Come back, you get a short week. Saturday, December 30th, you've got Detroit at home for a 7:15 evening game on ESPN. And then you close out the season January 6th or 7th against the Washington Commanders on the road, just like you did last year. So that final stretch is going to be brutal, and you gotta think that 10-day layoff from Seattle to Philly, and the fact that you've got 3 straight home games there, that's going to be the time to really rest up and make sure that you're prepared for this stretch run.
Yeah, and you're really, honestly, Bobby, from week 13 on, from Seattle to Philly to Buffalo to Miami to Detroit, and then the Commanders maybe trying to play their way in. That to me that's like playing 6 playoff games right there. I mean, yeah. I anticipate Seattle, Philly, Buffalo, Miami, Detroit, all those teams battling for playoff spots. Even the Commanders could be battling for a playoff spot like they were last year. So, this is going to be a very difficult stretch. The Cowboys, me personally, I look at this, and I know somebody asked us a mailbag question, what do you predict the schedule? I'm kind of thinking, is 11-6 possible? Is 10-7 possible here? I think there's going to be some stretches in this season where how the Cowboys respond. Are they going to be healthy enough? The one thing Mike McCarthy has been able to do late in the season is keep his team healthy enough to be ready to play these games. So I kind of feel like that, if he's able to continue to do that, then the Cowboys will have a chance to win these games. But you're talking about a very, very difficult schedule to end the season with. All those teams will be battling for playoff spots.
You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. And Brian, you mentioned there that, when we were wrapping up that segment, you mentioned how, what kind of a record is this? Is this an 11-6, a 10-7 schedule? A big part of projecting that, a big part of understanding that is going to be, what does this offense look like under Mike McCarthy?
Yes.
What kind of a learning curve is there? What kind of how much does it limit the turnovers? How much do the adjustments work? Sheil Kapadia, who covered the Eagles and the Seahawks at different points for ESPN and The Athletic, very good writer. Now he covers the NFL as a whole for The Ringer. He had a really interesting article over at The Ringer this week talking about what we learned about every NFC team in the 2023 NFL offseason. I'm just going to read this stretch that he had to say about the Cowboys. It's a little lengthy, but this is from Sheil Kapadia's article. You guys should go check it out at The Ringer. But I'm interested for your thoughts on this as a whole, Brian. He says, what we learned about the Cowboys was they overreacted to their playoff loss. The Cowboys were a very good team last year. They went 12-5, and their plus 125-point differential was third in the NFC behind only the Eagles and 49ers. They made sensible trades to add wide receiver Brandon Cooks and cornerback Stephon Gilmore, and the departures of tight end Dalton Schultz, who left in free agency, and running back Ezekiel Elliott, who was cut in a cost-saving move, are unlikely to be devastating. But the biggest change will be their offensive play calling. The Cowboys let Kellen Moore go, and head coach Mike McCarthy is now running the show. McCarthy indicated this offseason that he thinks the Cowboys can benefit from a more run-heavy approach that limits turnovers and puts games in the hands of his defense. Here's where it gets interesting. He says McCarthy's comments demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of what is actually wrong with the Dallas Cowboys. Were turnovers an issue in 2022? At times, yes. But overall, not really. The Cowboys turned the ball over on 10.8% of their possessions, which was slightly lower than league average. Dak Prescott was intercepted on 3.8% of his passes, which was the worst mark among starters. Not all of the interceptions were his fault, and interceptions were not an issue for Prescott previously in his career. It's reasonable to think that the Cowboys got some bad turnover luck last year, and Prescott won't throw nearly as many interceptions in 2023. The bottom line, it's hard to envision a scenario where the move from Moore to McCarthy offers an upgrade. In 4 years with Moore, if we isolate the plays where Prescott was the quarterback, the Cowboys performed like the second best offense in the NFL in terms of EPA per play. Did the offense look bad in a playoff loss to the 49ers? No doubt. But that was one game on the road against the best defense in the NFL. Ideally, the Cowboys would have examined what went wrong in that game, made some tweaks, and moved forward. Instead, they made a big change that could result in a step back in 2023. So a lot there from Sheil Kapadia, but overall, the overall crux of it to him is you were not in dire straits on offense. You overreacted to a playoff loss to San Francisco. You can maybe say the reaction was compounded by the playoff loss the previous year as well to San Francisco, but says that ultimately he thinks they potentially made a mistake here on offense. Your overall thoughts on what Sheil Kapadia said? Do you think there's some truth to what he said, or is he missing the mark?
Well, I think the statistics and everything that he presents is very valid. I think, to me, the biggest question going into the season for me, and it always will be, is Mike McCarthy has he'd had enough of Kellen Moore, and Kellen Moore had enough of him. And I do believe this with all my heart, Bobby, that during the Green Bay game, when they lost that game, that was when the relationship completely fractured. I mean, Mike McCarthy could have clicked over during that game when they had 2 touchdown lead and say, run the ball, keep running the ball. Don't stop running the ball here. Let's kill some clock. But he allowed things to get out of hand. And all of a sudden, he allowed one of the best quarterbacks to ever play get back in the game and ultimately, torch you to win the game. So to me, I understand. I think Mike McCarthy made this personal. I think Mike McCarthy also looks at it this way, Bob. He looks at it as, if I'm going to lose my job as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, I want to do it on my own accord. He feels like that all right, there's 2 things here. If the Cowboys have offensive success and we see Dak Prescott limit the turnovers and have production, then he becomes, I'm the guy that's going to get credit for turning Dak Prescott around. I'm the guy that's going to help Dak Prescott not turn over the ball. I'm going to be the guy. See, to me, this is everything about the offense is predicated was predicated on Kellen Moore. None of it really was Mike McCarthy. None of it all was Mike McCarthy. So this is his opportunity. If he could turn things around for Dak Prescott and take Dak to another level, then he will get the credit for it, and he will get a contract extension likely for it. If they lose and Dak falters and they have turnovers and they don't win games, then Jerry Jones will find a new head coach, likely Dan Quinn, and then they will look for somebody who can run the offense. There are just way, way, way too many moving parts right now on this offense for me. When you start to talk about a new line coach, a new running back coach, a new play caller, a new quarterback coach, there's just a lot going on here. And if you were to tell me, what do you think is going to happen? I think that's ultimately the thing that could take the Dallas Cowboys down. They're talented enough to win 10, 11 games, no question. But this offensive coaching staff, I feel like they've got to prove to me that they, in fact, with all these changes, can be the difference makers here, much like what we've seen with the Cowboys defense. We have complete faith in everybody that coaches on the defensive side of the football for the Dallas Cowboys, even though they've made some changes there. They changed at linebacker. They changed George Edwards out of there.
Yeah.
But still, it's still Dan Quinn. It's still AD. It's still Al Harris. It's still, those are the things. We have complete faith in everything they're doing on the defensive side of the ball. I just feel like Mike McCarthy made this a little personal, and he's like, listen, if I'm going down on my own accord. If I'm going to survive, it's because I did everything on offense, and I'm the one that got myself this contract extension.
I think all of that is pretty reasonable and well said. Do you think that, because I think one of the—
What do you think? What do you think about that? And you said reasonably. I mean, I'm not looking.
Well, here's the only caveat to it, and you may have.
I think McCarthy's trying to get credit for the offense.
Yes,
I don't think ever since he's been here, he's gotten zero credit really for anything. You know,
Yes.
the guy wins 25 games, right, in 2 years, right? You throw in a playoff win, won 25 games in 2 years, and he's fighting for his job. Other places they're throwing a parade. Not here, they're not throwing a parade. You know, and then you get your owner, and tongue in cheek, old Jerry Jones says, "Yeah, it ain't the problem here. You know, it ain't the players, it's the coaches. It ain't the, you know that." You kind of like laugh, but then you deep down inside, you know, Stephen Jones and Mike McCarthy probably cringed a little bit.
Yeah.
You know? So
and that's where I don't disagree with what you said. The only thing I would add, and you may have even been inferring it with what you said when you talked about McCarthy making it personal or whatever else.
I think he made it personal. I do.
I do think that the biggest factor in Kellen Moore not being here is Kellen Moore did not want to be here anymore.
No, hell no.
And I think it was something.
Mike McCarthy anymore? No.
And I think that's something that. Look, I will say that I've been critical of Mike McCarthy at times. This is something that I said on Sean and RJ on 105 to the Fan this week. Is that I will say this for McCarthy's idea of wanting to control the offense. To me, it had to be all McCarthy or it had to be Kellen Moore. You couldn't run back in with this bits and pieces of, you know, West Coast being thrown into the air Coryell that Kellen was trying. And it caused a lot of issues, I felt like, was this hodgepodge scheme that they tried. I think that they were going to be better off just saying, hey, look, let's commit to Mike McCarthy's scheme or Kellen Moore's scheme, but we cannot have this blend anymore. This is harming things. But I do think that the biggest reason why Kellen Moore isn't here anymore is because Kellen Moore told the Cowboys, I don't want to be here anymore. True. And the question then is, how much of that was just Mike McCarthy making it to a point where Kellen wanted to leave? That would be the dynamic, I guess. But overall, I don't disagree. I think the offense is going to take a step back this year. I don't think the offense is going to be as good as it was last year. They made the ball over less, but I don't think that they are going to be what they were under Kellen Moore. And I think ultimately there are coaches on the offensive side of the ball who are going to have to answer for that before Dak Prescott answers for that with Cowboys management.
Oh, there's no question. They will not. The evaluation of Dak Prescott, it will, like you said, if Mike McCarthy pulls this off, and Bobby, there's a side of me that thinks that Brian Schottenheimer is going to be the play caller. By the time we potentially get to that bye in, week 6 is the Chargers game. Depending on what the record is after that bye, that Rams game in week 8, that could be the first time that we hear about Brian Schottenheimer calling the plays. I think there is going to be and I think Mike McCarthy wants Brian Schottenheimer to call the plays anyway. I really do. I don't think Mike McCarthy wants to be the primary play caller, but he has to sell it to ownership and sell it to the fan base that he's going to call the plays. He wants Brian Schottenheimer calling the plays. You know, he could talk about sleepless nights and, you know, excited about being in meetings and all that stuff. Mike really doesn't want to do that. He really doesn't. If Mike wanted to do that, he'd have stepped in and done it more with Kellen Moore. He would have taken that play call sheet and he said, hey, run the damn ball. You know, I'm the head coach here. Stop throwing it. Run it. You know, hey, right here before half, don't take a shot down the middle of the field that's going to get the ball intercepted. We got points here, you know?
Yeah.
He let things happen. And to me, I think Mike McCarthy wants Brian Schottenheimer ultimately to call the plays here. You know?
We said there, you know, both of us agreed. I think that there's a strong, at least for me, there's a likelihood that the offense is not as good this year. I don't think there's big overhaul. I don't know how effective that's going to be.
Too many moving parts right now. Way too many moving parts.
What are we going to be talking about at the end of the year? If this offense is better than it was last year, what are we going to be talking about as
better?
If it's better, are we going to say
Mike extension for Mike McCarthy, that Mike McCarthy and Brian Schottenheimer and Mike Solari and others figured it out? That's what we're going to say.
Very. Let me drill it down even more specifically then. Do you think we'll be talking about, hey, this offense worked better because Dak Prescott was better? Dak Prescott won all world. Are we going to be talking about Mike McCarthy showed
The coaches.
Evolution. Solari showed he could stabilize the offensive line. Which do you think is the primary thing we're talking about?
Coaches. They're talking about the coaches because
which coach specifically do you think we'll be talking about?
Oh, we're talking about McCarthy. We're talking about
Solari.
McCarthy. Yeah,
I feel like if Solari stabilizes a lot of the
if they get Dak to play better, get Dak to play better where where he doesn't turn over the ball. And like I said, if okay, say I'm completely wrong, which I could very well be, say McCarthy does call plays throughout, then he will get the credit. He'll because we would give Kellen Moore credit and we'd give Kellen Moore blame. Mike McCarthy is staking his coaching reputation on this season. Yep. He's trying to get an extension. If they have success and they find a way to get in the playoffs and Mike McCarthy's the reason because that and the offense is better, then by all means he deserves an extension. And I will be the first one to admit that I'm wrong about that. I just don't think that he's going to be the primary play caller by the time we get to the Rams in week 8. I just don't see that. I see, well, maybe it's a 3-3 team. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it's 3-3 and they're not getting it done in the red zone and they're not really getting it done on third down and they're struggling, finishing drives. Then it's going to be at 3-3, the evaluation when they always talk about go across the hall and evaluate this, that, and the other. We could very well see that Brian Schottenheimer will be the primary play caller. And then it goes from there. I think McCarthy would rather have, this is going to sound really strange, but maybe not. I think McCarthy would rather lose his job with Brian Schottenheimer calling the plays than Kellen Moore calling the plays. Does that make sense?
Sure. No, I think that makes total sense. Marty Schottenheimer was a huge influence on Mike McCarthy. He talks about him
Mike McCarthy doesn't have to work for anything anymore. Yeah. Mike McCarthy's not a young, hungry coach. Mike's done some really good things, but Mike is not that guy, the grinded out coach. He's not that anymore. The older you get, the more you talk about being at the lake and things like that. He's fine. Hey, I got another year on the deal. You want to let me go? I'll make my money. I'll go back to Wisconsin. I'll take the misses. We have a place there. He's to the point in time where he's got all the money he needs. I'm sure he wants to win. All these coaches want to win, but are you willing to sleep on the couch at night, every night, during the week to try and come up with a game plan to beat the Philadelphia Eagles in week 9? No.
When you mentioned there that maybe it's the bye week, we start hearing that chatter of,
team could be 3-3.
They could be 6-0 for all we know.
Sure. If they're 6-0, then fine. Sure. The thing keeps rolling, but there's just that gut I have.
The Cowboys have historically, when they have made in-season coaching changes, they have typically done them at the bye during the Jerry Jones era. If you've got the 49ers, who have been 2 years in a row now, have forced the Joneses to reevaluate their roster with the way they played them. If you have the 49ers and then the very following week,
that's the problem.
Kellen Moore is right across the way.
And he runs it up on you.
And then you run into the bye week and get to stew on it. I see what you're saying, because to me, that if those two games go poorly, and then the Joneses get to sit on that for 2 weeks leading into the Rams,
if you go to Los Angeles and
really quickly, just to be fair, the reverse could also be true. If he goes and beats the 49ers and shows up Kellen Moore, that could solidify him after those 2 weeks.
I have no problem. If you find a way to get this team in the playoffs, advance, offense looks better, I have no problem talking about you getting an extension. I have no problem with that. But if you all of a sudden it's 3-3 and 2 of the losses going into the bye, say you get mauled by San Francisco and then the Chargers put up a bunch of points on you, that flight home from LA is not going to be good. And then it's going to be Todd Archer asking a question. It's going to be Bobby Belt asking a question. It's going to be Clarence Hill asking a question. Mike, what's wrong with the offense? Mike, what's wrong with the offense? Mike, what do you think you need to do better about the offense? That's going to be reality. If this thing is 3-3, 2-4, and the offense is not getting the job done, you're going to start to hear a lot of questions or going into that bye.
You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is now time for our Dean Julia Love of the Star mailbag. We got a lot of questions here. We haven't asked a question from Dean Julia.
Let's do that.
Well, let's get a Dean Julia question in here.
I think he put in 3 today, I saw.
He did.
Okay.
First question, this will be the one we asked from Dean here. Do you think if Cedric Wilson got cut in Miami, that he's the wide receiver 4 here the very next day? Also, can you tell me more about Jalen Brooks? The draft show videos when he got picked looked like he moved well. So your thoughts on Jalen Brooks and if there would be a spot for Cedric Wilson. I know that quarterback would love to have Cedric Wilson here again.
Yeah, I think that Cedric Wilson, the problem is are we talking about a training camp cut or are we talking about a seasonal cut? Because if it's a training camp cut, you have to look at the best veteran situation and stuff like that. Are you going to get him where he could choose, or is he going to be part of the waiver system? You got to always worry about that depending on when he gets cut. If he make his own choice, I'm sure he'd want to come back to Dallas. Brooks, I felt like, when we had a chance to visit with him post-draft, I remember he was talking about the special team stuff that he's capable of, the flyer, the person protector. It was all brought up about him maybe being the new version of Noah Brown, that kind of guy. He catches the ball really, really over the middle. He can extend. He can catch the ball behind him. The guy has some talent catching the football. I kind of thought, well, what's his trait? What's the one thing? I think his hands. But I think maybe when we start to see him, his toughness, if we see him as that flyer, personal protector, guy on the kickoff return as a blocker. Noah Brown played a lot of different roles for you. And Brooks could very well be that same guy. They don't have a whole lot of guys that are playing special teams at wide receiver, right? The Simi Fahokos and
that's why Tolbert couldn't get active.
Tolbert can't get active because of that. So Brooks, absolutely. Where he's going to make this team would be as probably a special teams player more than a wide receiver.
But I do agree with you. Showed good hands. I think when I had not watched him before he got picked, went back and watched him.
He gets open. The guy is
tough. He tracks the ball well.
Yep.
He adjusts to bad balls. I mean, there are some things to like about him. He's
absolutely.
When I watched him, I didn't know what to expect. When I watched him, I thought that's a reasonably draftable player. Yep. I don't have a problem with it. Question from Travis Rambo. What is one player or position that they could trade for mid-season that would push them over the mountain for the playoffs? I think if we've seen anything from Jerry Jones's time here, it's the one position he will make a mid-season move for is receiver.
Yeah.
And he's done it several different times. And if they get into this season and Jalen Tolbert is not working out, Gallup has not bounced back, and it's Brandon Cooks and CeeDee Lamb, and maybe Cooks isn't quite the player that he once was, I could see them saying, look, we're close. We need to go get a receiver. Because every time it's felt like we need to get a receiver, they make some sort of move for a receiver, whether it's going to trade for Amari Cooper or sign a T.Y. Hilton or whatever. Some moves are bigger than others, but they will always make a push for a receiver if they think they need it.
There's no question. The receiver, do you feel like that if something were to happen at running back, I mean, that say that it doesn't come around as well for Tony Pollard, and Ronald Jones is just okay. Deuce Vaughn, do you lean on Deuce Vaughn or Malik Davis? We've kind of talked about that situation. Do you think he would trade for a running back, or they would try and get a running back if those guys don't work out?
Could. Yeah, absolutely. That could be one that
I was thinking it was more offensive players than defensive players.
That's sure, skill position player. Yeah.
I was thinking it was skill guys all the way.
Question here, and this actually kind of ties in to what you just said there. Question from Joshua Wenger. Ronald Jones or Ezekiel Elliott, Brian?
Well, the thing about it is Ronald Jones to me, and listen, I'm not going to sit here and I've seen Ronald Jones play a little bit. I mean, I know what Ezekiel Elliott is. I know Zeke can catch the football in the backfield. I know Zeke can get the tough yards, the tough inside yards. I know he's pretty slow. I know he doesn't play with much of a burst anymore. I think Ronald Jones is probably a little bit quicker to and through the hole. We'll see about the catching, and we'll see about the blitz pickup stuff. The one reasons why you would think about bringing Zeke back is just because of the other things that I just talked about, the pass protection, the catching the football, the short yardage runner. That's the only reason you would think about bringing Zeke back over Ronald Jones.
Next question here from John, and this one we just addressed. Hey, what's something they could address in the middle of the season? What's a position besides kicker that they could add before camp? I don't know about you, Brian. I still look at it and say they could use linebackers, and I feel like there's always the potential of somebody who could there's always plenty of free agent linebackers that I feel like could contribute if you needed to go out and get one. So that's what stands out.
They're moving some guys around, and so let's see what happens with Devin Harper. That's one of those ones that, man, when he was coming out of college, you talk about a guy that can run, a guy that can cover some ground.
I will remember we were sitting there at it was OTA practices.
Oh yeah,
and he made a play to the sideline that I was sitting to Brian, and I remember Brian made an audible noise of and he had to look quick, like, wait, who was that? I mean, he's got some bursts. He flashed at times.
See, that's what I'm saying. They have got to figure out what's going on with Harper, Jabril Cox, Overshown is, and they need to get those guys going. I mean, and they need to get Damone Clark going too. Clark, Cox, Harper, Overshown. Keep an eye on Isaiah Land. I was talking to some people in the organization about him. They're going to play him as an off-ball linebacker first, and then use him as a pass rusher. So that's a young man that was a college free agent from Florida A&M that they really, really like.
I've heard from a few people they think Land makes the 53.
Yeah, very well could.
They think really highly of him. I will say, back to one thing. I don't know about how you feel about this, Brian. This isn't anything we've discussed. My bold prediction, or maybe it's not that bold, but my bold prediction early on right now is I don't know that Jabril Cox gets out of training camp. I think they've lost a lot of confidence in him.
I've talked to people in the organization, and it's funny, and I had a chance to visit with George Edwards, who now is at Tampa, and I talked to George, and George was super, super, super positive about Jabril Cox, but he says every time it's like one step forward and then two steps back. Every time you feel like that he's making progress, something happens where he goes on he gets two steps back. So I know they really, really like him a lot. I think he's up against some serious competition. When I mentioned about the guys like Overshown, Harper, I don't think Malik
Clark,
Jefferson. Yeah, I don't think Malik Jefferson's much. But when Isaiah Land, I mean, they could very well say that Land is a better player than Jabril Cox, and Harper's a better player than Jabril Cox.
I think that, and maybe this isn't fair, but to me at least, I view it as if we get out here in these practices, Brian, and Cox still has that black compression sleeve on his leg.
Yeah.
I'm just going to feel like that's a guy who he's still 2 years later, he's not trusting his knee.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Next one here from Christian. Brian, do you think Mike McCarthy actually intends to run the ball more, even though when he was previously calling plays, he was passing quite a bit? So do you think that's rhetoric, or do you think it is a genuine intent for I want to run the ball more?
I think he wants a tougher team, but I don't think he runs the ball more. I think he was trying to send a message that, if they really, really, really wanted to run the ball, I think they'd have gone out and drafted a guard. I think they would. Now, okay, you could say, well, Dan Broadus, they drafted a blocking type of a tight end. They made it a priority to go get a tight end that's a good blocker. So my gut feeling is that he's trying to say, yeah, we want to run the ball more, but I don't know if he'll necessarily run the ball more. We need to see what's going on at left guard. We need to see what's going on with Luke Schoonmaker, as a point of attack blocking tight end. We need to see, how much do you really want to run Pollard inside? How much you want to run Deuce Vaughn? I mean, Ronald Jones, how much, we talked about all those backs, but until they kind of figure out what's going on at left guard, left tackle, and this offensive line, right tackle, I'm gonna say that he probably wants to throw the ball. He says he wants to run the ball. I'm guessing he's gonna throw it a little more.
I don't disagree. I think there is a little bit of rhetoric there. Look,
I think he wants his team to be tough. I think he wants them to have a tough, running the football is a tough-minded attitude. And I don't think he wanted to, I think there are times, like I say, they lost the Green Bay game because they didn't run it enough. I still think that sticks in his craw a little bit, that happened the way that it did.
I do too. That meant something to him. That didn't just mean something to him. That meant something to several people on the staff.
Yes.
A lot of people going back for that.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that bugged a lot of people. That does it for us here today on the Love of the Star. We will be back with you guys. Again, I saw a lot of comments on the last video. I saw people commenting on the YouTube, and they were saying, please keep this going through the off season. Guys, we don't plan on going anywhere. We're going to be doing this every week. There is no break. We're going to keep bringing stuff to you. And topics may get a little more evergreen as we get into like June. We're going to have less to talk about. We're going
to, that's a great time to like, okay, who do you like better? You compare an offensive player to a defensive player. Who's going to be? Trust me, we will come up with some really, really, really good content.
In fact,
we can't thank you guys enough for seriously. We get the numbers, we see the response, we see the questions. You guys have been great to Bobby and Peyton and I, and we can't thank you guys enough for doing that for us. And we're going to, trust me, this thing is going all the way to the start of training camp when we get out there in Oxnard.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if you guys have any specific topics you'd like to see us touch on during these couple months, if there's some like, hey, talk about this or compare this or whatever else, let us know in the YouTube comments, tweet at us, whatever it is you want to do, give us a shout, and we'll definitely pick up those topics because we're always looking to touch on things that you guys want to hear about. For Brian Broaddus, I am Bobby Belt. We will talk to you guys later. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.